Good afternoon, class. I want to check in for a few more minutes and add some comments to those that I made earlier today. Toward the end of class today, we were looking at some of the defining shifts or transitions that took place after the arrival of the Spanish to the Western Hemisphere, and particularly some of the signature changes that mark the beginning of the colonial period. And so we're focusing on four things. I've started with the objective just to sort of refresh us so you can get that down. And these are our four things. We talked about the first two in class, the changing ecology, disease, and also the larger patterns of how things that were existent in the Eastern Hemisphere or the Old World were brought to the New World and vice versa, but much of the change is going to come from things brought from the Old World to the New World. And then we also discussed labor patterns, and particularly the institution of encomienda. And today we're going to be looking at the significance of race. Okay. So if we recall that Iberians of the Reconquista back in the Eastern Hemisphere from essentially 700 to 1500, if we recall that they were obsessed with distinctions of one's blood lineage, it's not all that surprising to note that race would play a distinctive role in shaping the new colonial society in America. Opportunities in the Americas attracted waves of new settlers. They had chances to sort of reinvent themselves, to start anew. And so coming to the Americas was very much an exciting prospect. Some of these Iberians were just opportunistic, and also it's worth noting that the African slaves were brought to the Western Hemisphere largely to offset declines in the native populations that were a consequence of the diseases and epidemics that we discussed earlier in this lecture. So as a result of this racially diverse colonial society, we're going to have a new social hierarchy take place. A new social hierarchy will be imposed to really determine one's prestige and also opportunity within colonial America. So we have Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans, and then various mixtures thereof that are all going to be vying for their place within this new social hierarchy that will take place. So the new demographics, and by demographics I mean groups of a certain age, of a certain race or ethnicity, or of a certain gender, the new demographics featured a large influx of young European males, many who were coming to, set out for themselves, get a fresh and opportunistic start. But it was largely men, and they were largely coming to serve in the ranks of the Spanish military that was hoping to conquer and take over and render Spanish new areas of the Western Hemisphere. So as a result of these European men coming over here, we're going to have the phenomenon of miscegenation, which just means, it's kind of a dated term, but racial mixing. So we're going to have white Europeans intermingling and creating offspring with in some cases, Native American women, and in some cases, African women. And so we're going to have a really complicated and really unique social landscape that will result from this. So various new categories will be created out of this. We'll talk about this later in the week. Among them are the Peninsulares, the Creoles, Mestizos, and Mulattoes. And it's worth noting that Martin Cortez, who was the product of Hernan Cortez and Dona Marina, or Malinche, he was a mestizo himself. So he will be... Corey. Thank you. Appreciate it. No problem. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, pardon that interruption. And the Africans experienced a few benefits that their native counterparts didn't, and that was that they tended to be more immune from disease. They had other options available to them for gaining freedom. Some of them could actually earn their way out of slavery. And some of them chose to resist slavery by forming things like fugitive communities. So they would run away and could even hide out and live in various villages. In fact, the name maroon is essentially a term that was used to describe a fugitive slave, someone who's living outside of the plantations and established grounds for the slave economy and slave society. Okay, so this is going to start the process of creating the social hierarchy and social environment of this new European colony in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, and then finally, religious pressures. From the very start, Christianity had served as a sort of code for the colonization of the Americas. Even though the earliest explorers had recognized the accomplishments of various American civilizations, we saw this in the document the other day, where the Spanish members of the Cortez expedition are expressing their awe at the accomplishments of the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan and its markets and its architecture and its layout and its planning and so on and so forth. But despite all of the impressive things that the Aztec had accomplished, they are still classified as savages because the European mindset of the day said that if you were not Christian, then you were by definition barbarian. So from an early point, Europeans thought of themselves as delivering a gift, a cultural gift of religious conversion. And they could use this as a justification for overtaking native peoples because they were quote-unquote saving them. So if we're saving them, then of course they're not going to mind if we treat them harshly or handle them rudely. It's all for a greater cause. And of course, some of what the Europeans were trying to do was just an effort to enrich themselves and profit at the expense of the native peoples. So the natives are going to respond in a number of different ways. It's a story unto itself. And some of it even seems a little bit like the quote-unquote new Christians of the Iberian Peninsula. There will be some ways in which the natives convert without fully converting. So this is not to say that among the Spanish clergy there weren't genuine desires to save the natives and for the sake of Christianity. The Reformation in Europe that we talked about last week, it had prompted a lot of fresh thought about the future of Catholicism. There are new orders of the faith that were created, like the Jesuits and also the Franciscans. And these tended to be kinder, gentler sects of the church. They wanted to reform the church, make it better, eliminate many of its prior shortcomings, and this new emphasis found expression in the New World. The College of Santa Cruz de Tlatelolco in Mexico City was an effort to teach natives the Bible and to allow them to begin the process of converting their fellow native people. The various orders, the Augustines and the Dominicans in particular, orders of the Catholic Church, tried to create and teach hundreds of missionaries. And this required large efforts and other shortcuts. Sometimes they tried to make Christianity extra recognizable to the natives, and this sometimes even created situations where the character of Christianity was perhaps even compromised in some other ways. So the other things that we'll just briefly mention here is that in order to convert and make this learning accessible, they sometimes translated the Bible into Nahuatl and into Quechua. And the irony here is that the Christians oftentimes preserved these languages and preserved native belief systems because they were trying to use these languages to promote Christianity. And with that, I will stop, and we'll maybe talk about this a little bit at the beginning of class tomorrow. Thank you.